I think both the evolution of the Central European power markets and also the recent, both the election in the US and also the elections that we will have in Europe, I think it only will reinforce one thing. We need to continue the integration of the European markets. We need to continue to assume that there will be both disturbances to the supply of critical fuel like gas, for example, not necessarily negative, it can also be positive. The Trump administration, we know, is quite open to more drilling. That can bring more LNG to the market. We can see that having an impact, at least over time, on the European markets. But still, I think the most important thing for Europe is to continue the integration of European markets. As in other policy areas, Europe needs to become, and also the, let's say, the neighboring countries to continental Europe needs to become a stronger region on its own in order to be less impacted by the disturbances that we will continue to experience both from the east and the west. The role and the importance of the exchanges is, of course, to send the right price signals and both encourage the right investments, but also the right utilization of the existing assets, both renewables and now to a growing extent, battery energy storage. As a market participant, to make sure that you create the flexibility, both through the analytics required to forecast, predict, and manage the output from renewables, but of course, as we see with the price signals, the extreme volatility. We need to make sure that we are also bringing in and complementing the renewables with, let's say, the supporting technologies. Otherwise, the type of price signals that we currently see, if we don't handle them, that could create a threat to the continued growth of renewables, simply because the price volatility is quite extreme. So we need to make sure that we position a good complementation with state-of-the-art market activities, combining analytics. AI is not only a fashion word, it is something we need to utilize actively, because the amount of data that we now have access to, the data we can utilize for just working smarter than in previous years, is something that we just need to embrace. Otherwise, this transition is going to be more bumpy. Of course, it is the grid that is predominantly the reason for not being able to handle the renewable capacity. And just to illustrate this, in Germany so far this year, we have had close to 500 hours of negative prices, and quite extreme negative prices as well. And we actually, to date, we have 85 days with a negative average daily price, which is of course a quite strong signal and a little bit of a dangerous signal. But it's also interesting to observe that a country that has come further than all other countries in the world, with the exception of the US, it's the UK. And despite UK having launched more battery storage capacity than anyone else, they also continue to see a significant increase in negative hours. And that comes, of course, with how the support of renewables have been done historically, and also how they continue to support renewables. If you continue to support renewables in a way that encourages even production when there is an oversupply in the system, we have, of course, a risk of undermining the mission of renewables. I think it's already clear, levelized cost of energy is the lowest with renewables, and I think it's time to start to balance the incentives for the supply and demand side and maybe base it on market mechanism. Because I think the market now, with the exchanges and with the market participants, are in good enough position to actually handle and utilize this potential itself by combining the renewable technology with the storage capacity facilitated by the markets.
There should be a strategy to meet the evolving needs of the market. And do you think battery will be a solution to this?
I think battery is certainly a part of the solution, and we see it now. Battery is probably the most both attractive asset in the energy industry because of the volatility. And I'm also convinced that batteries will start to help us shaving the extreme price signals that we currently have, that are in a way also scary to the developers of some of the conventional technologies that we see are on the rise. But of course, the extreme negative scenarios, being exposed to that as nuclear, whether it's fission or fusion producer, is of course a scary signal. But having batteries to shave it off so that it becomes within manageable levels, I see battery is absolutely a technology that has a place in the system. I think as a market participant, we have a responsibility in also doing our work to prepare ourselves and, let's say, equip us with the needed analytics to be able to position ourselves in the market with managing these assets commercially. Of course, I think the role of the exchanges and the market can help by providing even better visibility between markets, so spread products that can allow us to hedge or take active positions by not considering only one market but others at the same time. I think that will help the liquidity, and having more participants being active in the market will again help us shape and create even better price signals, and also combine the liquidity in a more concentrated manner, which I think will be positive. A PPA platform, I think that certainly is a complementary offering to the future. Of course, I do see your point, Konstantin. It's not easy for an exchange, and it's not necessarily easy also for the potential off-takers as well, and maybe even the generator to facilitate and integrate with other grid requirements. And I think, of course, as a market participants, we are, of course, more than happy to help both the generating and the consuming side. But I would also like to see this in light of the, we mentioned reporting or regulation earlier. The ESRS reporting requirement is now activating the demand side much more actively than we have seen before, in more consciously procuring renewable power as a part of meeting their ESG commitments and also the requirements from the European Union. And of course, making a PPA, or we can also call it a PSA, it's a power supply agreement product, available and easier to consider for industry and commercial customers, could be a way of creating a more balanced energy system where you actually connect the ultimate generators with the ultimate consumers. Of course, there is still a managerial aspect that needs to be handled, but again, based on our success doing this and also our peers in the industry, I think there are enough, let's say, there is enough support in the industry that can help facilitating this. But we need to probably come together, and but it would be exciting.
Can I ask something else about that? What is your take on the PPAs between countries? Is it very difficult at the moment? Do you see that happening more often in the future? Because we see that European markets are becoming more integrated every day with different platforms. What do you think?
I think ultimately, of course, the idea of a common market and a common marketplace, if we could work on eliminating the physical bottlenecks, I think this would of course send, from a European continental perspective, the right price signals. Because why should there be significant price differences in neighboring countries that can offset each other? That is not necessarily facilitating the best competitiveness of the European Union or the European continent as such. So I would of course welcome it, but I think it should be market-based. And I think we heard a reflection on it earlier that despite significant interconnector capacity, only a limited amount is available for actual trading. And I think that's of course what we need to ensure, is that if there, to support that idea, which I do support, which I fully welcome, we need to make sure that it can be left to the market then to optimize the capacity between the markets in the best way. Then I believe it can fly.
Absolutely. Alex, do you agree with this?
100%.
Do you have any expectation the US custom and tax regulation for Chinese and non-Chinese PV module manufacturers to be followed up by the EU as well, especially after the Trump presidency?
Yeah, I guess it's a glass bowl question. No, I think I would assume that the EU, if Trump does what he has promised, there will be some kind of a reaction, and there will be something along the same lines also introduced by the EU. However, I think it will be at a significantly lower level. And I think also Europe needs to be careful not to undermine its own energy transition by literally closing the door to the manufacturing hub of the world.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are practices in China that probably are a bit questionable and that the price levels are somewhat artificially low. But I think it's probably the wrong approach to try to exclude and prevent China from contributing to the energy transition at a cost level. And we know that the financial situation across Europe is also not better now than it used to be. So I think also we need to be a bit pragmatic here in this regard. Representing the market participant perspective, currently operating 6 gigawatts, 6,000 megawatts of renewable capacity in Turkey and Germany, I certainly both welcome and agree that connecting Europe better, making the barrier for entering the market, both as a consumer, but also as a generator or a market participant, is going to help us realize the long-term ambition of a successful energy transition. It will bring down the cost of electricity, and it will also send the right signals for the investment into the needed complementary capacities. So I think that let us handle the matching of supply-demand. We know how to do it. I'm talking about the market. It is about forecasting the anticipated generation. It is about having access to reliable and a visibility to the demand side. And if we get that, the needed, but not necessarily full transparency, but the needed level of transparency, I trust that the marketplaces and the market participants will help us integrate the European electricity markets probably better than the politicians have been able to do so far.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and coming to Istanbul and taking your time to be on this panel. Thank you very much.